God values and sees singleness very, very, very differently than what we do. But the moment I even use the word that God values singleness, some of you have jumped ahead, jumped even to the wrong conclusion about what I'm going to be talking about. See, our culture has rejected God's way of doing relationships. But people still are looking for love. They're looking for someone that will complete them, their other half. They're looking for their soulmate. And in the looking, because it's a human longing, isn't it? The human longing of the heart to be loved and to love. In the looking, sometimes we make a real mess of it because we don't do it God's way. God's ways are different to our ways. It's a noble thing to seek to be like Jesus. But Jesus was single. Single, but he was complete. And he wasn't looking for love. He came to bring love, to show love, to display love. But God deliberately, he created Adam as single. Long before he ever introduced him to Eve, he made Adam as a single human being. He didn't do that with the animals and the birds. He made them male and female right from the start. And God didn't do it to show Adam that being alone is not good. Some are hoping that Adam, if he's by himself for long enough and then God goes, there's Eve, he'll really appreciate her because he's been alone for a while. But I reckon by the time that Adam got to his 100th birthday and he's blowing out all the little candles on his cake, I reckon he would have got pretty over the novelty of his new bride. Doesn't matter how you set up a relationship, sooner or later you get very used to that person. God created Adam as single to prepare Adam for relationship, not just with his wife, but with another human being. Because Eve thought differently to Adam. She reacted differently. Like when Adam jumped in his souped-up four-wheel drive and started flying around those corners and up those really steep hills in the little Garden of Eden, Eve got really nervous. She was scared there'd be another car coming around the corner. You can't, they're the only people. But there are things that happen in our car that I'm very comfortable with. But I'm married to someone that's not as comfortable with some of the things that happen, especially in the past. I'm learning that we're different. And while Adam was single, God gave him an identity. He gave him a place to belong. He gave him a purpose for his life. He showed him that God could be faithful in providing every one of his needs. And then God did something that no one was expecting. God put some boundaries and restrictions around Adam's life. He said, you can eat from every little tree that's grown in the garden, but one. Don't go near that one. Not good if you go and nibble on that thing. If you don't understand boundaries while you're single, if you don't understand boundaries full stop, you'll make a mess of relationships. And when God said it's not good for man to be alone, it wasn't talking about lonely. Adam was not lonely. The Hebrew word that God used, it's the word picture, it's the word for separated, but it's a word picture of a tree and there's a branch lying on the ground and the branch is separated from the tree. They're meant to be together, but it's separated. It comes from this root word that means divided. Adam was relationally divided and God said, that's not good. See, God created us as relational beings and we need each other. Now, don't miss this. Your singleness is the foundation of all the other relationships in your life. Your singleness is the foundation of every single relationship that you're surrounded by. And some of you are going, hang on. I'm not single. I'm married. It's too late. I'm married. I'm not single. How do you relate to God? You don't relate to God through your wife or through your husband. You relate to God as a single human being, as an individual. When you're not with your spouse, you relate to everyone else in your world as a single individual. If you're home and a friend calls in, you talk to them as an individual. If you're at work, you relate to people as an individual single person. How you get on with other people fundamentally has nothing to do with other people. It has everything to do with how you get on with you. Outside of your relationship with Jesus, the most important relationship you'll ever have in life is not with the person you're going to go to sleep with tonight. It's not with your best friend. It's not with a family member. It's with yourself. That is the most important relationship you'll ever have on this earth. And I know right now that some of you don't believe what I just said. Because if I was to ask you, what are two of your greatest strengths, not your giftings, but your two greatest strengths, and your two greatest weaknesses, right? If I just picked on someone, some of you would not be able to tell me just like that. Without thinking about it, you couldn't tell me. And even if you thought about it, some of you wouldn't know. But you know about someone else in your world, you know their strengths, you know their weaknesses, you can describe someone else. But how well do you know you? If you are the most important relationship in your life, how well? What do you know about yourself? The knowledge of God leads to the knowledge of self. And the knowledge of self leads to the knowledge of God. It's like this circular thing. And as it goes deeper, you expand as a human being. Now, I have this amazing capacity to put things off, things that I don't like doing. I keep putting them off till I never do them. But that has caused me and my family a lot of grief over the years. It hasn't always gone well. I also don't like detailed stuff. But that's a problem, because details are really, really important, especially in an organisation like a church. Years ago, we were meeting as a youth team at Coral's mum's place in Moroney Street, and it was just a normal youth night. Youth team gathered together, and just as we started, one of our team, almost like a spokesman, said, "Lex, before we start, I've asked everyone in the team to come with a list of all your weaknesses." And I was telling a pastor friend of mine this one time, and he goes, "What? I would have sacked the lot straight away." And I said, no, you miss what was going on. Because what they're doing, they said, "Lex, we want to tell you where you're weak so we can cover you, so this team can work a whole lot better." Because I was not self-aware enough to know my blind spots, to know where I was weak. And I was hurting what we were trying to do for God through what I couldn't see. It took a team of gutsy people to speak into my life to help me. And when we don't know ourselves very well, we so easily take on the expectations of other people. We take on what people think we should be like, what we should do. And that leads long-term to feeling guilty, like we've failed. We can't live up to other people's expectations, and it drains us, and we get to a place where I give up. I can't be what you want me to. Well, we're not meant to be. God designed us to know us, get to know us through Him and His bride, the church, together. If I don't know my weaknesses, I'll be unrealistic about what I can do. I will take on things that will let down other people because I'm not aware of my weaknesses. I'll hurt people. I'll even blame people for my own failings. If you want a really important piece of paper lost, give it to me tonight. I promise you, I can lose it before we get home. Mandy has the same gifting. Don't give her anything. Give it to Coral or Aaron. Now, Jeff, he's different. Jeff is fairly reliable, but it doesn't mean he always has been. Years ago, when Jeff was working on a farm for us, and we were doing a lot of embryo transfer work, we had vets working for us and we were paying out a lot of money. There was one day we had to pay the vet a certain amount of money to get in his bank account. And we lived out of town and the bank had closed, but it needed to be in there the next morning. So Jeff was leaving the farm. We said, Jeff, we've got this cheque. It's $20,000. We're going to put it in an envelope. At the front of the bank, there's a little sliding little box, like a little letter box, and you slip it in there and that'll go in there and the bank manager will get it tomorrow morning and we can pay the vet, right? So Jeff got there. Now, this was a long time ago and they're just starting to get things called ATMs in the wall of a bank. And they had little dockets and bits of paper coming out. So they had in the wall of the bank a rubbish collection place. I forgot that had got changed and Jeff didn't look careful enough, so Jeff took a $20,000 cheque. Now, cheque. For those that don't know, a cheque was a bit of paper and you could write numbers on it and it became money. And you could write as many numbers as you like and you took it into the bank and it turned into money somehow. But they got rid of that system nearly, right? So Jeff took this piece of paper that had numbers written on it and it went into the rubbish and we never saw it again. We had to start all over again, making new bits of paper we called a cheque with more numbers on it. If you don't like you, you'll have trouble liking other people because you can't give away what you don't have. Hey, Mel, isn't it good to be in the room? You've been running all around Tassie and Dave was so right about how you've been sending those texts and encouraging us all, and you have. You've really encouraged me. You've been praying for Bonnie so brilliantly all this time you've been away. Love you, appreciate you. But how good to be in the room, isn't it, hey? Good to see you. You'll be amazed if you ask God a question where that will take you, how God answers those questions. And in response to a question, Jesus talked about your singleness being the foundation of all other relationships in your life. And that if you don't like yourself, that's a significant problem. And he doesn't use the word like. Now, I spoke about this a couple of weeks ago, but it's so important. I just want to revisit it for a moment. Jesus was asked that if he could take 669 laws and rules that the little scribes and the Pharisees and the religious people, all the little detailed people had gathered all out of the Old Testament and all the prophets, they'd gathered 669, and they said, Jesus, can you take hundreds of these laws and just melt them down to one? Just do it. And so Jesus started to answer, and he says this: love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your strength, with all your mind. And this is the first and greatest command. And you could hear the little roar of, good one, Jesus, very good. Oh, good, Jesus. And then he really messed with them. He said, but the answer's not one. It's two. And the two are so close together you can't separate them. They're actually one. They're one. The word it actually means they're the one substance. And then he went on and he says, and the second is equally as important. It's the same. It's love your neighbour as yourself. Loving yourself begins before you can ever love another person. And Jesus is saying, this is like, I don't know if you can understand how radical this is, but Jesus is saying that the whole of the Old Testament comes down to you loving yourself just as important as it is to loving God. You can't separate the two. And that if you really love yourself, you'll be able to love others. And he doesn't tell us to love God like we love ourselves, because loving God is very different to loving people. And I'll try and explain it this way. In 1 John 4, John makes this statement. He says, we love because he first loved us. And Jesus, in response to this woman who had really messed up her life, and she comes to him publicly in this home, and she gets this little jar of perfume and she pours it on his bare feet, and she wipes it with her hair. Like, that's weird. But you know, Jesus is really comfortable with weird because he doesn't look at the weird, he looks at the heart. And while everyone else is watching the weird, what this woman's doing and why Jesus is not stopping her, Jesus hits them in their hearts and he says this: she's showing much love because she's forgiven much. And the flip side of that is that if you haven't been forgiven much, you're going to love much. So if you think that fundamentally you're a good person, that you don't need much of God's forgiveness, you'll struggle loving God much. Our need for forgiveness is actually a perception, because we're all in the same boat or aeroplane. It's a perception in here about forgiveness, because we're all the same. See, without forgiveness, every one of us go to a lost eternity. If you're in a plane and you're in first class and someone else is stowed away in the baggage compartment, they're hiding in there and the plane goes down, doesn't matter where you are in the plane, does it? The point I'm trying to make is this. To love God, we are responders. We're not the initiators. He initiates love towards us, so we respond. And he says to us how to do that with all their heart, with all their soul, with all their mind, and all their strength. And then he glues this second command together, the same substance, and it's inseparable. And he says about loving ourselves. And he says it's the measure that Jesus uses to show us our capacity to love others, especially those in need, which is our neighbour. And your neighbour might be the person in your home, your child, your husband, your wife, your friend, someone that needs your help in your world. I understand why some people push back when you hear the words about loving yourself, because our community, our culture has really messed with that. They've made a counterfeit of it. It's not God's way. In fact, our culture's way is to say, put yourself first. That's how you will be able to love yourself. And Jesus showed us the opposite of that. See, Jesus could go to the cross and not be crushed by our rejection of him, because his love for himself was so strong. Jesus' love for himself enabled him to talk about himself a lot with pure humility. Because when he talked about himself, when he explained who he was doing it not for his benefit, but for our benefit, so we would know who he is. Do you know what a woylie looks like? A woylie, you know a woylie. Does anyone know what a woylie looks like? I'll try to describe one for you. They have grey brown fur. They got a long tail that they'll actually fit into the palm of your hand. They communicate with each other through their urine. And these little scent glands that they rub on things to communicate with each other, they can only be found in a couple little patches in Western Australia and off a few islands off the South Australian coast. They are critically endangered Aussie Marsupial. Now I'm going to get a photo up of one. That's a woylie. It's not a rat. I had a cuter photo than that in someone's hand. Lauren, out there in the van, what did you do with my cute photo? But, yeah, not a lot of meat on them. Don't worry about them. But what I've just done, thanks, you can take, they've gone. What I just did then with that woylie, I want to do with the concept of loving ourselves God's way. So I want to paint a picture. I want to describe what that looks like. And so here we go. It looks like self-confidence. Not arrogance, but confidence. For Jesus to walk up to 12 young blokes and say, leave your family business, come follow me and I will make you. That's confidence. For Paul to be able to say, as I'm following him, you follow me. That's confidence. It's not arrogance. See, Paul understood singleness. And because he understood singleness, he understood himself. And he could love himself how God intended. And he could even write things like this. I'm going to read this to you. It's ridiculous. This is what he says. I wish everyone was single just as I am. Yet each person, it's almost begrudgingly, yeah, but you can't, because each person has a special gift from God and one kind of another, but you can't be like me. I get it, but I wish you all could be like me. Well, he saw his gift of singleness as so precious that he wished we're all the same. And if Paul got his way, the human race would have stopped 2,000 years ago. But thanks for God. See, God wrote Genesis, and God says, be fruitful and multiply and have babies. Look at us all. We've done really well, but no thanks to Paul. So what was Paul trying to say in a silly way? Well, that's ridiculous. He was saying that I so love myself that what God has put in me is so precious. I'm so thankful. And I wish you could all be like me. Now, I'm going to share a moment into my little head. And some of you will think that I'm pathetic, and that's okay. Some of you will think I've got problems, and I have. But for years, this is honest. This is honest, right? For years, I've looked at other church leaders and I've thought to myself, I wish you could have the gift mix that I have. I feel sorry for other church leaders sometimes because some leaders are cholerics and they just trample on people, they charge over, they hurt people, they damage churches. I think, you've got the wrong gift mix, go away. But see, I am basically a sanguine, choleric, melancholy mix. Now, for those that don't know what I just said, it's not a swear, and it's just words. And so the sanguine is the fun part of me that loves people. The choleric means that is the visionary with enough drive to try to chase and pursue something like starting a church from nothing. And the melancholy is I can feel your pain. I can relate to your hurt. I can be creative. I have no phlegmatic in me. I don't want it. I married one. Well, sort of. She's got a fair bit in there, right? But honestly, I've thought that is the best mix you could have for leading a church. But it's not arrogance. It's just a confidence in who God's made you to be. And loving yourself will also be expressed in self-respect. I sold a pup to someone once, a cute little pup, and it was just on the phone. I just knew their first name. I'd had no contact with them personally. We sent the pup via some other people. But I did say to them, Send me a photo of the pup one day. I'd love to see how it's settling and keep in contact. A couple of days later, I'd forgotten that. And I got a message on Messenger with a woman with not a lot of clothes on, deliberately dressed with not a lot of clothes on. And I thought it was one of those things and you just delete it and get rid of it. And I saw the name and she's trying to contact me and I thought, what's that name? I know that. What's that name? And I went to Coral and I said, hey, Coral, look at this. She said, get rid of it. I said, no, hang on, I think. And so I opened it and it was the lady that bought the pup. She's a single mum and she was so excited the pup. But when I saw her, I was so grieved. I was so saddened by how she was presenting herself to the world because she didn't know who she was. And she was so lonely as a single mum. She's trying to attract a guy, and the only guys she was going to attract were the wrong type of men. And I was just grieved inside because that's who she was presenting herself. She didn't know who she is. She has no value on her life, how God had valued, no self-respect, how God would give it to her. And a close cousin of self-respect is when you place a high value on you. When Nehemiah's building the wall and the enemy comes, hey, Nehemiah, come down for a coffee, we'll have a chat, we'll go to Mr. D's, we'll catch up. He goes, I don't think so. These are his words. Listen to what he said. I'm carrying on a great work. I cannot come down. Why should I stop the work and leave it to go down and be with you, you scumbag? Like, he didn't say scumbag, no. It should be there, because that's what he meant. But he had a value, a God value in what he's doing, and he didn't stop. The opposite of loving yourself is hating yourself. If you don't like you, and you're lonely, and you're looking for love, you are so vulnerable to being used and manipulated. And you will not place a high value on you. There was one night at youth here in Bairnsdale. We're packing up at the end of the night. All the kids had gone home. And a girl that normally came, she wasn't there this night. And she turned up and she's sitting in the dark down on the gutter of the street and she's just crying. And when I sat down with her, I said, what's wrong? And she said, Lex, tonight I've had sex with 2 different guys and I feel so used and so dirty. I just wanted to be loved. Broke my heart. Broke my heart. And she was hating herself even more at the end of the night than when she started the night. Because she had no value. She was so open to being manipulated and used. There are certain things that I will not and cannot do. Not because I've got self-control or great integrity. It's because I put such a high value on God's call on my life. It's so precious what God gives us. And that protects me, but it protects us as a church. And if you allow God to show you how valuable you are, it will protect you. When you love yourself God's way, you'll also be self-motivated. You'll even be able to have control and self-regulate your emotions. What you do will come from an internal motivation. It won't be external. The pack-up, set-up team that comes in every week, when we're here in the mornings, let's start at 6 in the morning to set up for you, for us. Why? Out of love. Out of love to serve other people. We don't see most of the work that happens at Red Gum. We come and appreciate it and we go. But there are people that serve and serve and serve. But I want to tell you something. If you begin serving and it's not out of a heart of love for yourself, the love you're giving out will get depleted very quickly because you haven't got much in here, and you'll start to resent the people that you're actually serving. I've seen that happen. Anyone that can serve in a church for a long, long time and not get resentful towards the people they're serving has to have an overflow of love for themselves. It will never work. Another little description of what self-love looks like, we're nearly there, is generosity. Generosity is just such a beautiful thing, but only when you give and don't need something back. And you can only do that when love for yourself is very strong. It frees you to do amazing things like honouring people, praising people, encouraging people. See, Mel, I'm telling you, I know we've said twice, there's a third time tonight, right? Your encouragement in your texts, I've shared a couple of those with close people to me because they were so encouraging. It takes someone that loves themselves to be able to do that, to be generous with someone else. Self-affirmation. My family laugh at me when I walk in the house and brag on me and tell them what an amazing... I've bred this bird. You wouldn't believe it. I'm the first person in the world. No one's ever seen... I bred this. I've got such a gift on my life. And I celebrate it and they laugh at me. I come up with a brilliant idea as an illustration, like a woolly, that's how you pronounce it, woolly. Up until yesterday, I didn't know what a woolly is, but gee, I loved asking you what a woolly was and you all looked dumb. Not one person went, I know. But that began with an idea in my head of how can I add a little flavour to the night and not go to sleep like Steve's struggling tonight. How can I do that, right? I know, Steve, you work long hours. I get that, right? But I'm thinking, how can I add... I'll look up an endangered species in Australia, no one knows, and I found this thing called a woolly. And I came inside, and I'm so excited, and Mandy and the boys and Aaron just got back, and Mandy just laughed, and she says, Dad, that's woolly good, didn't you? Right? Right. But see, I know when I'm preaching if it's helping you. And I know when it's not. I know when I've done well and I know when I haven't. You don't have to tell me, I know. Do I like encouragement? Absolutely. But here's the difference. I don't need it. I don't need your encouragement, but I appreciate it. Last Sunday night, Aaron went home and he was so disappointed in how he preached because he imagined what he would do and how it would go, and he was so disappointed. But this is the beautiful thing about Aaron. Once upon a time, that would have destroyed him. But it didn't on Sunday because he said, I did my best and that's got to be okay. That's the growth of a human being. That's discovering, coming from a family that he didn't get the love and support that I got as a kid. He's had to grow into that, and he is. And it's so exciting when you get to see it. I'll finish with this. There's many, many, many ways we can get a feel for what loving ourselves is. I've skipped a few, but there's a big one. It's self-forgiveness. One of the most beautiful things that you can do to love yourself is to forgive yourself. And if there's things that still weigh on you and there's still pain attached to the memories, you're not quite free yet. And self-forgiveness is the same as forgiving others. It's a process, and you've got to stay with it And when stuff comes up and you realise I'm still not free, just go back to God and say, God, help me. Help me forgive myself. I want to be free of this. Choosing not to forgive yourself is self-hatred. I'm going to leave it there tonight, but I want to, in 2 weeks' time, pick up and spend the right amount of time in how do we do this? Not next week, Mother's Day's next week, and next week we have Barry Clark preaching here, which is pretty exciting. Now, technically he's not here, but the people online won't know that because it's pre-recorded, but he's doing it just for us and as part of this relationship series. And I'm really excited about having Barry, that he'd be willing to do this for us. But in 1 minute, I'll give you the how to love yourself, okay? Just 1 minute. You can time me on it. It starts and ends relationally with God. And it starts in finding your identity in Him, who you are. And when you discover your identity, it helps you understand your value. And when you discover your value, you will fall in love with you. Because we treat valuable things differently. When you discover how valuable God sees you, you will love yourself. And God has given every one of us at least one gift. And when that gift is activated and operating in your life, it lifts your self-worth because you can see your significance. You can see what your one and only life is doing and the impact it has in your world. And it changes who you see you are, and you go deeper in your love for self. And that enables you to love others. Let's pray. I thank you, Jesus, that you showed us that loving others starts with loving ourselves in any relationship, and that is found in our relationship with you, and out of that it flows over to others. And I thank you that it's not just possible, it's meant to be the normal way we do life. And I thank you have ways that can just be for every one of us the same experience. So I just pray right now for those online and those in the room, that we would be so open to receive and understand your truth that would change how we see ourselves, how we value ourselves, that we would get to flow in all the expressions of what loving ourselves really looks like your way. Thank you, Jesus.